this episode of the Gaming Roundtable. I said I was going to be back. I've been having some difficulties with my with this mic setup that I have. I'm going to have to buy a new set, so hopefully this comes through clear and concise. Just to throw that out there. This is episode 86 of the Gaming Roundtable. Pull up a seat if you're able, grab a cold one if you must, and which I'm doing now. So this has been on YouTube today, and I wanted to do a video about it, where Monolith Studios and Warner Brothers have made the decision in the last, the Lord of the Rings, War of Mordor or whatever, the last game released that had loot boxes and microtransactions in the single-player experience, and how now they have decided and come to their senses 5 months later since the game came out, or 6, or whatever we're at, that it does affect, like this affects the Nemesis system. Like you're not building like the relationships with the orcs, enemies, and friends and allies and all that stuff like you did in Shadow of Mordor, which was an excellent game in its own right. And now we all can throw this out here because it has been pointed out by Jim Sterling and Young Yi on both of their channels respectively that they know that it affected that. But why now? Why wait 5 months to turn them off? Why didn't they turn them off a week from now or 2 weeks? Now the theory is, the consensus is that they didn't so they can continually make their money off the game until they decided that we've made a bunch of money and we can turn them off now because we've recouped our costs, whatever the game costs to make, which is probably in the upwards of $100 million. Who knows? Since of course they're never transparent about how much it really costs to make these games. Only on really tremendous releases do we get that information. You know, referencing back to my secret shit video that I had created. Now, the other side of it, though, I see is maybe Shadow of War or whatever, or War of Mordor, or whatever the hell it's called. The sales were initially good, and then they tapered off thanks to the loot box stuff. And people were prevalent with this. Angry Joe was talking about it. Jim Sterling was talking about it. Yang Yi was talking about it. A lot of popular channels were discussing it because the game came out right around close to the same time that Star Wars Battlefront 2 came out. That was also dealing with the same thing. And although I don't believe that the Lord of the Rings game got as much, I guess, hate because it's not a multiplayer focused game, but it was still doing that. And it does undermine the Nemesis system, and it does undermine those stories you create. And I actually told them, as much as I absolutely loved Shadow of Mordor, and I had it on my 360, and have yet to pick it up on PS4 because I had completed it on the 360 and feel like I don't really need to buy it again, unless it's like a deep sale or something. It's funny how these microtransactions now are being removed, and even the gold that you purchase will be turned into items, and like the marketplace is going to be completely gone. And they're taking that away so that they can focus on that Nemesis system and how you're really building it up, and a bunch of other stuff that they are fixing and updating. And I feel like maybe the game, to be perfectly frank, sold well initially and then tapered off to a point where they're now decided, hey, no one's buying our game. Like, now the life cycle of most games, I think, is a good year or two nowadays before, especially a really good game or a AAA game in this particular case that Monolith created, that maybe they were like, yeah, we're making some money off the monetization, but not that much, because people are just like, man, they're just playing the game, until they figured out that you had to do all this other stuff at the end and buy stuff in order to see the real ending of the game, which is ridiculous. But I find myself curious if they're doing this because no one's really 6 months down the road now, no one's talking about their game, no one's playing it. I have seen in the last 6 months at least maybe 10 to 12 copies of it in GameStop here and there, sometimes 2 at a time, 4 at a time, where people bought it and then bringing it back saying, I don't want to deal with this, transaction micro stuff. It's just not the same. Shadow Mordor didn't need it. It told a compelling story and an interesting story with a great open world with a really awesome thing called the Nemesis system and introduced that. And they came up with a way to circumvent that in the sequel to it, in its sequel. Um, and I feel like that it was unnecessary, and now they're turning it all off. I wouldn't support that game, just like I wouldn't support Need for Speed Payback, and I didn't support Star Wars Battlefront 2 until they turned it all off. And then when when they were about ready to switch the microtransactions back on, I sold the game because I wasn't going to deal with that. And now I'm going to re-pick it back up because they are literally changing everything to make it more like just a normal battlefield style type of aggression where you're not earning loot boxes. You actually rank up. You rank the character. You do everything just like the earlier Battlefield series. And I find myself really happy about that. And now I feel like I want to pick up the new Lord of the Rings game because they're doing the same thing. And it's interesting to see that these companies are backpedaling on their games that they've put out 5 to 6 months ago. They're literally backpedaling on their own games because they realize that people, and I think what happened is Battlefront 2 sales tanked, and I think the Lord of the Rings game nowhere sold as well as Shadow of War. We don't know those statistics. No one has specifically asked them on the sales figures. I would surmise to think that that's what happened. That the second Lord of the Rings game, War for Mordor or whatever the hell it's called, the sales started strong, and then after the microtransaction stuff came out and everybody knew about it, I felt they might have been a little weak, but people were still buying it, and now people stopped buying it. And you don't see a whole lot of people doing videos on it or gameplay or anything on YouTube. And I think WB, who spent more money and more time on it this time around, with a bigger open world and much more to do, and all the stuff that they improved upon with loot systems like Diablo and style loot and things like that, and now it's gone. This is stuff that's gone. So they realize people are not buying this game, and maybe if we turn them off now and get rid of it now permanently for good, people might be interested in picking up the game retail side again. Which again, I think is a little too late, because if you're going to pick it up, you're going to pick it up used, and Monolith's not going to see a single dime off the game. But they might pick it up in digital sales. It will not surprise me that the day that they take everything out, you watch, and mark my words, and I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll swallow my pride. But if I'm right, you'll see where the day that the big update comes out for Lord of the Rings, War for Mordor or whatever, I bet you it goes on sale in the marketplace in PSN and probably Xbox. I could almost see that happening. Like now they'll throw it on sale for half off for $29, or maybe even just a hair cheaper, because hey, that's cheap, and I heard they turned everything off, so they got rid of the stuff, so now I'll buy it. I could almost see them doing that. It'll coincide with some kind of sale, and I find myself fascinated by this whole ordeal. It started with Star Wars Battlefront 2, and even though I believe the Lord of the Rings game came out first, they're switching it all off and taking it out, removing it, because they admit, the whole idea of like the Nemesis system is compromised by buying orcs and stuff, since you don't get to like meet them, recruit them, you're just buying them and you have them, and that kind of circumvents the whole point of the game with its Nemesis system. So, I mean, I don't really want to say that I give Monolith like a pat on the back for what they're doing. I don't think the game needed it in the first place, and had it not been in there, I believe it would have sold even more, and people would still be playing it, more apt to be playing it anyway. It's so funny to me that now game companies are incredibly leery about doing this kind of system, because now they're like, if we do this and we don't do it right, and we tie it into like, you're not even playing our game, you're just buying stuff so you can skip portions of the game, and the backlash has been vocal. I mean, EA lost money and actually, and now Warner Brothers and Monolith lost money on this deal. And when you see the money being lost, maybe now we're seeing this backpedaling effect. I'm really curious to know if other games that are coming out that might have this monetization is going to change. Is Activision going to make Black Ops 4 not have those like they did in the previous entries because of the backlash? I mean, it's really hard to say, but I think we as gamers, we had accomplished something and proven to them that we're not going to like be forced to buy your game and then spend a ridiculous amount of money just so that we can get ahead. I think Battlefront 2 took to the forefront because it's multiplayer focused. Yes, it has a single player. Yes, there's some single player modes, but it's more multiplayer focused than anything. And I think that that's important. Lord of the Rings was strictly single player and no multiplayer function. Yet now they're taking everything out of there. And so, and again, I think people are saying it's because they've made all their money now, and now they don't need that store in there. And that's not the case. I really don't believe that. I think they're turning it off because the game didn't sell as well, and they're hoping to generate more sales for it, copy-wise, new copies, digital copies. Normal non-GameStop type stores who sell it because they'll try to move more units. I think they have a lot of unsold units, and they figured that, hey, this is why everyone decided not to buy it. I found out I was real excited for the game, and then I seen, like Angry Joe had seen, the whole loot system, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, if you can buy orcs, and this is what I said when I saw the trailers and stuff for the marketplace for the game, I said, well, wait a minute, but what about the Nemesis system? That would affect that. Like, I knew that going forward. And when I would go to my local GameStop, the manager there and others would say, hey, you want to pre-order the game? It's going to be awesome. Is this and that and this and that and this and that? And I said no, because the microtransactions, no. And I said the same thing with Battlefront 2. I said, I'll buy Battlefront 2 when those are removed. And they were removed, and I bought it. When they came back on for a little short stint, I sold the game because I didn't want to have any part of that game. And I did not buy the Lord of the Rings because I thought that was a game, especially when it came out, that you, at the end game, you had to buy all these different orcs and different stuff to see the real ending. So you were spending real money to get in-game gold, which would in turn let you buy loot boxes. I was like, no, not happening. And I refused to buy the game. And I decided then that I would boycott games like that. I'm not buying them. I didn't buy Need for Speed Payback. I wouldn't have bought Need for Speed Payback anyway, because now there's no cop chases in the game world unless it's a story specific thing. You can travel around the whole open world, and the cops have been removed. Well, wait a minute, this is basically the Need for Speed Rivals game. Why would Rivals engine? Why would you remove the cops? And random police chases are what makes games like that fun. So I don't know why that was removed, but nevertheless, its loot system is ridiculous and had to be overhauled some by EA because of the whole Battlefront 2 thing. But the whole Lord of the Rings thing and its microtransaction is really, to me, good that they are removing the entire system so you can play the game as normal, a normal game. And I think game companies, publishers and developers, in particular publishers, are realizing if we keep making games like this to try to maximize our dollar like this, people are not going to want to buy our game, or we'll see the sales of it really taper off, and I think I don't applaud or pat Monolith in the back for taking them out, but I do because I think that their reasoning behind it is because no one's really buying the game and they're trying to sell it again. But nevertheless, the Monolith needs to understand, and EA needs to understand with their games going forward, and Warner Brothers, who works with Monolith as the publisher, should realize, hey, when this stuff is discussed in the future for other titles, look back at Battlefront 2, look back at Lord of the Rings, a multiplayer focused game and a single player, and look what they did. and they need to look at the past, and 2 years down the road when they make another Battlefront or whatever they do, we can't do that because we'll get shit on by the community, and they won't buy our game, and that's that. So that's all I really got to say when it comes to this video. I just want to discuss a little bit about how I felt about it and why I feel like that the microtransactions in the latest Lord of the Rings game is being removed entirely. This has been episode 86 of the Gaming Roundtable, and thank you for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. And as always, gamers, good gaming.